I have Mark Hopley on from the Fly Fishing 97 podcast to share his podcasting story and some tips on fishing the Kamloops area. You know I love it when I have another podcaster on the line. This is the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. In today's episode, I talked to Mark Hopley, who hosts a great fishing podcast out of Canada. We hear about some of the great guests he's had on the show over the years, some of the people you need to connect with up in the Kamloops area, and his favorite patterns for stillwater. Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsors. Since 1977, the Fly Fishing and Tying Journal has long been considered the angler's magazine, with original how-tos and technical articles written by the best trout and steelhead anglers in the West. They are committed to sharing exceptionally written essays, fiction, poetry, and in-depth guides to fly tying and fly fishing. FTJ is one of my go-to magazines, and if you haven't checked it out recently, you can get started today by calling 1-800-541-9498 or heading over to the web at ftjangler.com. GotFishing.com is your trusted source of information with access to the world's best fishing trips. You'll never pay a dime extra for the trip you book, and in many cases, less than advertised. Find out where Got Fishing could take you by heading over to GotFishing.com today. That's GOTFishing.com, or reach them by phone at 208-630-3373. GotFishing.com, the easiest place to start your next fishing adventure. So without further ado, here is Mark Hopley from flyfishing97podcast.com. How's it going, Mark?
Good, Dave. Hey, man, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate getting a chance to chat with you.
Yeah, for sure. This is going to be awesome because I always love getting the chance to interview other podcasters, and now obviously you've got the Fly Fishing podcast going, so we've got I think enough that we're going to be able to fill an hour, no problem. But before we jump into all the the fly fishing, I think your show, we kind of do the same thing, starting off and hearing a little background, the story. So can you just tell us how you first got into fly fishing and then how the podcast came to be?
It's funny. I ask everybody that question on the show, and I got to think about it now. And I had a feeling you might ask that. I've been fly fishing probably since I was 11, 12 years old. So I'm in the Okanagan Valley in kind of the interior of British Columbia. So we got lots of still waters here. And I guess basically my dad, actually my folks were not into fishing whatsoever, but there was a principal. My dad was a school teacher, and his name was Bob Dunn. And I'll never forget it. He took us to a lake called Headwaters, which is just kind of behind Kelowna area lake. And we're catching all kinds of brook trout and rainbow trout. And I thought, you know what? I got to figure out how to get into the sport, because I'd never, ever done it before. And I was fortunate enough to be on a lake that it was just like lights out. It's one of those lakes that the fish aren't big, but there's lots of them. And I would say that kind of got my passion. It got my attention. And ever since that, it's been everything fly fishing.
Yep. So you've been going, and was that, and you were, how old were you when you first?
I want to say 12.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like 51 now, Dave. I'm
Gotcha.
really bad with time, but it was,
Long time ago.
It was the old Ted Peck fly rod. I remember that. Bought it at a local store called Woodward's for, back then, they were probably like $18-20.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah. You're in an area that is obviously one of probably the greatest still water areas, maybe in the world. And my dad fished it a ton. I remember hearing all the stories, and the only time I went through there was on my way to the Skeena for steelhead. So I haven't really hit the Kamloops and all that stuff. But I mean, can you describe that whole area in the still water to somebody who hasn't been up there?
Well, the thing that people don't get is we're in a desert.
Oh, okay? No kidding,
yeah. So being in Canada, not a lot of people think of deserts.
No.
So we're at the northern tip of the Sonora Desert, and it's sagebrush where I'm at. It's sagebrush, sand, it's ponderosa pines, very similar to parts of California. So what we've got here, Dave, is we've got a lot of still waters that are basically, these lakes have to be stocked, or otherwise they wouldn't hold fish, because they do tend to winter kill a lot of them, or some of them may or may not have an aerator. But they've got an amazing stocking program in British Columbia. So we're fortunate enough to have true wild fish as brood stock from. There's a lake called Pennask Lake, which has never been stocked ever, and they pull a lot of eggs from there. So basically, you know, whether they're triploids or diploids, these fish grow, and the Pennask are just known to be voracious insect feeders. So they really match fly fishing well. They're aerial. It's like, I mean, it's everything a steelhead is on a smaller scale.
That's cool. How do you spell that? Pennask.
Penn.
Oh, P-E.
Yeah, Pennask. Look them up.
Okay.
They're beautiful fish. They don't have a lot of spots, but beautiful sheen, beautiful color. They get real clean silver. It depends on the water they're in too. They can. There's some real clean kind of aqua blue lakes we fish where they just look like chrome coho.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. I didn't even realize that either. That you mix the desert with still water and you get a lot of food activity, and then you guys with the great stocking program, it's just the perfect mix where you grow these giant fish, right?
Well, you know what I find, Dave, is wherever the ponderosa, wherever the timber meets the desert. So you got the grasslands kind of meeting the pines. That's where those fish grow, and it seems to be the common denominator. It's all about the pH, right? So those slightly higher pH waters, as you know, your neck of the woods too, and right, Northern California, you get into those, where the pH is just kind of getting borderline for the fish to survive. But guess what? They're full of nitrogen. They're full of feed. And you got to be careful with the water temps for sure in the summer, but those fish grow big.
That's awesome. So, I mean, I've had, Phil Rowley, I've had a few, Denny Rickards, some big Stillwater guys on, and it seems like, there's not as many, obviously, of those gurus. Are there who are the people in your neck of the woods? You got also Brian Chan. Other than those guys, are there any other big Stillwater guys that influence you or you know of out there?
Oh, 100%. It's a long, long list. You named two of them. I mean, Brian Chan is a walking encyclopedia, without a doubt. Phil Rowley I've had on the show, and same thing. And they're good buddies. I think are in business together as well.
Oh yeah.
Just totally dialed in. I mean, as far as Jordan Ulrich, great guy to chat with. He's a guide in the Kamloops area. And what you'll find, Dave, is a lot of the guys. I mean, I go back to Jack Shaw. His original books kind of got me into it, and then of course Brian Chan kind of expanded so much on that. But Brent Gill at the Douglas Lake Ranch, he drives a lot of content. He's just a source of information. Runs the private fishing ranch. I don't know if you know Douglas Lake Ranch, but if you want to get into some seriously big rainbows, and it's some people love private fishing, some don't. I know myself, it's got a place, because especially I've noticed that with COVID, a lot of the lakes are getting heavily pressured because for a while there was only so many places we could go, and I think just having that option to spend $100, to go and fish a lake, it's a nice option to have sometime. I can't afford to do it every day, but I think it's good to have kind of, let's just say, mix it up a little bit.
This is something I wanted to talk to you about, just because it's it's interesting for me as far as the podcast guests and more on the podcasting, right? So on your guests, I was kind of I've listened to some of your episodes and looking through your back catalog. How do you choose your guests? I mean, in topics and where you're going.
Well, you and I talked about this just before we started chatting. Like for me, I try not to be influenced by other fly fishing podcasts too much. I want to be influenced by the podcasts that I want to listen to. I want to drive the content. Like for me, just so you know, this is not a how-to. Like the Fly Fishing 97 podcast is not a how-to. And we may dig into that a little bit here and there, but it's people's stories. And for me, like, everyone's got an amazing story. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be a famous fly fisher to have an amazing story. But if I run into somebody at a random place having a beer, talking fishing, chances are I might ask them to come on the show, because especially if they have an amazing backstory. So whether it's a military background or somebody's got a musical background, or, just people's struggles in life. Like for me, that, and I try to always tie it back to fly fishing. So I definitely have a framework for the show, kind of the basics, how'd you get into it? But then I want to dig it. I want to know what you listen to on the way to the water. I want to know where your passion comes from. I want to know the sports team you're cheering for. I want to know the lessons you take out of fly fishing. So for me, I just try to expand it a little bit, get people comfortable, and then, man, the stories start coming after that.
Yeah, that's cool. And on your, the people that listen to your show, do you get, how do you get feedback from them, or, how do you know you're on the right track?
Well, at the end of the show, I always have a tag. My wife has a radio background, so she does the intro and the extra to the show. But basically, if you want to hear from somebody specifically, email me. And the email's right at the end of the show. Just mark it flyfishing97.com. And I've actually got a lot of guests that way. But I suspect you and I are similar in the fact that, they come from all over the place. Sometimes I'll shoot somebody an email at their .com. Sometimes I'll, message them on Instagram or Facebook, or sometimes I'll run into them at a fly shop or a fly show. I try to be diverse with that and not have any one specific way. Because I'll be honest with you, I think I felt like I was tapping out Instagram for a while. It's like, okay, I think, like, I noticed it last week. Okay, so I dropped the show and you had the same guy on the same week, and I'm like, crap.
Pete Tyjias, right?
Yeah, he's awesome. That was a great guy to chat with.
Yeah,
but that was a total fluke. I didn't know you and I hadn't had a conversation, but
I know.
And let's face it, a lot of these fly fishing industries too, they're putting media out at the same time, whether it's an author trying to sell a book, so they're doing the circuit, right? They're saying, hey, I have had a lot of people reach out, say, I got a book coming out. How'd you like to do a show on it? Yeah. And I'm all over that.
Yeah.
What about you? Where do you get most of your
pretty much the same. Yeah, pretty much the same. I do a little bit of here and there. I try to, as much as I can, get feedback. I have a Facebook group that I try to reach out to people in there as much as I can, and yeah, I find that people let me know. I try to keep it in seasons as well, so that's the focus thing, where I know if, okay, right now I'm on a fly tying season, and although we're not talking about fly tying specifically, overall I can kind of have a number of episodes in fly tying, then I can direct people that way, and that helps me focus too. Like this week I have Morton from Arex Hooks coming on, right? And typically I wouldn't have had him on, but I ran into him at the Denver show, and it was just, the shows, that's another good place, right? Networking. So just like you, man, everywhere I get people from all over the place.
Yeah, and I found since COVID-19, and to be honest with you, I think you and I are in the same boat. We're not doing a lot of face-to-face, and I've found it very easy to get people to talk right now. Well, there was a lot of guides that weren't doing anything. They were kind of tying flies and chomping at the bit to get out there, and they wanted to talk.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good. Well, I had, I guess let's keep it on the episodes a little bit further before we dig back into the Stillwater stuff. So, do you know what episode was your biggest or most popular, or do you have a favorite or anything like that?
Yeah, that's funny. Yes, I always say the last show is the favorite because I kind of feel that way. Yeah. The truth. Phil Rowley was amazing. I had Brian Wise on from Fly Fishing the Ozarks.
Oh yeah, I heard that
character.
One. Yeah.
I had Jimmy Watts. He's a bamboo rod builder out of the Seattle area who basically hangs off the back of a fire truck during the day. And I'll tell you, that guy, man, I could have listened to him talk all day. I got Lani Waller coming up.
Oh, you got Lani Waller. That's awesome.
Oh,
how did you track down Lani Waller? Because he seems like a guy that's disappeared off the map.
Well, you know what I did is I had a guide by the name of Dave Lisi out of Cooper Landing, Alaska. And we were talking steelhead, and this guy has a huge passion for steelhead. And a lot of times my guests come from my guests who they want to talk to. So Dave was saying, I have so much respect for Lonnie's books and his steelhead DVDs, and he's a steelhead guru, right? So he said, man, you want to read some good writing, read Lani Waller's writing. So I just randomly emailed him on his web. If you can, any of these people you can find online. And I said, hey, Lani, Dave Lisi from Alaska said, you're the guy. How would you feel about coming on the show? And you know what? He said, no, man, he didn't say no, man, but he said, no, I'm not, that's not my scene. I'm not a computer guy, blah, blah, blah. I said, look, me neither. I hate computers, but I like talking fishing, and it's just a conversation. How'd you like to come on and have a chat? And he's like, Absolutely.
Huh.
So usually I just kind of let that go. You know what I mean? It's like,
That's
okay,
cool.
you didn't want to do it, but I don't chase people. I'll ask them a few times, and if they want to come on, great. If they don't, I'll chat with somebody else, because there's a lot of people that want to talk fishing, and it's the hardest part for me. And I don't know about you, Dave, but is lining up the schedules.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got a day job, and it's like it's all encompassing. So basically, I'm working 24/7 these days, just trying to get podcasts edited and out.
Yeah.
But I love it, and I think I mentioned to you earlier, I would not stop doing this, even if podcasts went the way of the dodo bird. I would still do it for content.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, it's I think that's one of the things I always say is that and who was I talking about? I'm trying to think now, but yeah, you got to have that passion, because you're not going to make $1 million typically doing this thing. You know what I mean? You got to have that passion. So, and Lani Waller, man, that's amazing, because
he told some stories.
Did he?
Dave.
Is it out? Is it out yet?
No, man. I'm editing it right now. It's going to be released on Wednesday. What's the date today? July 1st. I'm gonna.
Nice. That. See, that's what's great about it, because I've got my little queue of, you know what I mean. So when that pops out, it's going to be killer. And Lani was, we kind of joke about it a little bit, because he's a steelhead guru, and my home river down here is the Deschutes, and he made some videos on the Deschutes, and he's got this one where we joke about it. We say, what's he say? He says something, jumper in the tail outer. He said this funny quote, and he just had this huge steelhead on and caught it. And I fished that same water, I just know the same, and I've hooked some amazing fish there. So I think I'm gonna follow up with Lani and see if I can get him on as well. But no, this is good.
You know what?
Yeah.
Shoot him an email and tell him you and I were chatting. He's just an amazing individual, and I found him really, really sharing of information. I think he's in Mexico right now.
Oh yeah. So is he totally done with steelhead fishing?
Hell no.
Oh, okay. He's still doing it.
He's 80 years old and still going strong.
Oh, good.
He's chasing permit, bonefish, steelhead. He still gets to California and Alaska.
Oh, nice.
And his I think his real heart is kind of in my province here in British Columbia. He spent a lot of time on the Babine.
Yep.
And
that's right.
I believe it's called the Silver Hilton Lodge.
Oh yeah.
Where
on the Babine. I've been. Yeah. We floated by it. We've. That's an amazing area. Yeah,
amazing guy to chat with, and he's really. You asked my favorite show. That's probably the one so far, but it's always changing. I had a guy by the name of Maitland Mike on, and he does a lot of steelheading on Lake Huron and its trips. And you want to talk? I know you're big into the wet fly swing. This guy, you should chat with Mike.
Cool.
He's dialed in.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's it seems like, there's a bunch of guests. We're never going to have a problem running out of people, right? That's no problem.
Well, that's at first, I'll be honest with you, Dave. At first I was worried about that. I thought, well, who's going to want, how much ground can you cover? But
yeah,
I think when you bring it back to life lessons and you bring it back to people's stories, people don't run out of stories, and everyone's got one.
Exactly.
And it's just kind of tying it back for that content. So you have that common thread.
Yep. It's cool. Well, and obviously this, like you said at the start, this is the networking, whatever you want to call it, the fact that we're kind of connecting here. Yeah. You never know where this goes, right? Just right away by me interviewing you, right, you're going to have a whole bunch of people that maybe hadn't heard of you, and hopefully, you'll get in their queue as one of their top 7 podcasts, right?
Well, and that's what that's what I love about this industry, not just the fly fishing, but the podcasting. Is it really is one big giant network, and there's a lot of crossover. It comes up all the time on the show. The crossover in the outdoor activities, whether you're into mountain biking or climbing or hiking or camping or canoeing or kayaking. It's all the same language, really.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting. We'll probably talk about this when we chat, again on our next, we're kind of doing a double ender here, but, the new podcast I have, the Outdoors Online Marketing Podcast, where I'm interviewing expert, right? These huge internet marketers. They, it's actually hasn't been as easy, right, as the fly fishing, because these people have all been on a gazillion podcasts, and I can't necessarily, I've got some huge guests, but a lot of them, right, I haven't been able to get the gigantic guests on. And,
well, I heard you mention some pretty darn big names on another podcast that you had on the outdoor online marketing podcast. And I think you're really smart doing that because you're networking on a larger scale and you're expanding your horizons. And it's probably going to get you more content for your other podcast, the Wet Fly Swing, as well.
Totally. Yeah, it's hopefully it kind of builds on each other. So, well, let's take it back to the water. And again, can you remind us what is your home water, and then maybe talk about how you catch the fish there, and what species are you focused on?
I mean, it's largely rainbow trout centric. I mean, that's what I'm chasing. There's 3 or 4 strains specifically. We mentioned the Pennask at the beginning of the show, and that's kind of the number one in my book. They've got a new strain which is called the horsefly that gets real aerial too, and the blackwater strain, more of a predatory nature, kind of like your Pyramid Lake fish that are, they're after those shiners. Anything blackwater related, which kind of originates in British Columbia in the Blackwater River area. They are looking for big meals. They're looking for bait fish. They're looking for large dragons. They'll take chironomids, they'll take midges, but they're definitely looking for meat. So streamer patterns, things like that will work. But in answer to your question, I'm fishing still water. I'm fishing out of like a Dave Scadden pontoon boat, or I've got 14 and a half foot Arctic cat that we use on bigger water. But it's mostly float tube pontoon fly fishing where I'm at. We also have, I fish the Smokameen River a fair bit. It's limited windows. I mean, you got a couple of good months. It's like any river system. We get some pretty high runoffs here, and things don't really settle down for another couple of weeks. Usually once July hits, I get July to basically September. And then you got to watch because that water temp gets so warm in August, so you got to pick your spots. But I would say this, Dave, 80% of my fishing is with a small strike indicator and a chironomid. Just because that's such a large part of the fish's diet. It works. It works. And all you have to do is tap into that resource once, and I guarantee you, it'll never leave your blood. It's like chironomid fishing for me is I try to fish with an indicator whenever I can. I know that's not a purist thing, but I don't really care. I don't care. It's like there's lots of different ways to fly fish. Don't get me wrong. I love to get them on an elk hair caddis on top. And when the caddis are popping, that's going to happen. But that's more of a late July kind of thing around here.
That's cool. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the indicator and the still water, the chironomids is huge. I remember my first time using those was on a similar stream. It was the Owyhee, and it was the same thing. I had under an indicator, a little chironomid about 1.5 feet under it, and it was lights out. You know what I mean? And
that's cool.
It was a good time. So okay, so we got it's rainbow trout. You've got these lakes, and is it still? And it's 80% of the time you're fishing still water versus streams.
Yeah, I'd say even closer to 90 if I'm being perfectly honest.
Okay.
I mean, we'll pick a section of the river, but it's usually in July and August, and we'll take off like, say, I don't know, a 10-mile section, and we'll just take a couple trucks, drop in at one point, and pull out at another and spend the day.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. That for me, honestly, is probably my favorite way to fish. It's just the reality is it takes a lot of time. And it's, we've all got day jobs, or most of us do. And I got 15 days a year plus weekends to, make that happen, which is sometimes limiting, but.
Yeah. So you are putting in, so these are big lakes and you're putting in and doing a shuttle on the lake?
No, sorry. That's on the river system.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Dave. So I'm going to say the Smokameen River we'll put in and knock off 8 to 10 miles or more. But as far as the lakes, I'm fishing mostly smaller lakes, to be honest with you. That's where, there are some very big lakes in my area. We got 100-mile lake, the Okanagan Lake, which is big. Skaha Lake, which is another lake, which is a large lake. And we've got, bass, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, perch.
Yep.
But I'm definitely focused on trout. So that means a lot of times getting out of the valley bottom, getting up more into the alpine, and chasing rainbow trout, 2 to 10 pounds. A lot of them, two would be quite average at a lot of the lakes we fish. But if you really want to hunt some big fish, they're out there. It's just some of those waters get a fair bit of pressure.
Oh, sure. Okay. And so on these smaller lakes, do you fish them differently than you do some of the larger lakes?
Yes, because I mean, I look for shoals. Like, so if a lake has nice shoals, I mean, if you get an aerial pic of it, or if you've got I don't even know the correct term for this. I always say topographical, but I'm sure there's another water-related term.
I think bathymetric, I think maybe.
Bathymetric. There you go.
Yeah.
I have never used that word.
Yeah.
I love it. So yeah, like that'll show you the drops and whatnot. But the fish that we're usually targeting are patrolling those shoals. So we'll anchor deep and cast in shallow. Sometimes I'll go in super shallow if there's a steep drop and the fish won't see you at all, and you're also fishing the deep side. We do that. That works well sometimes too. Kind of a little reverse psychology, I think.
So you're on the so you're saying you're on the deep side or the shallow side fishing it?
Well, we do both. Normally the deep side, casting in towards shallow.
Oh, cool. Yeah, right.
But sometimes, like say when there's a damsel migration or hatch, those guys they're coming from the deeper water and they're swimming towards the reeds. So sometimes when you're in shallow, I think that's kind of an underutilized way to fish, to be honest with you, because it makes sense that you're bringing them towards the shallows because that's the way those dragons and damsels are swimming.
Oh, yeah. So you're bringing them towards the shallows. So you're
exactly.
So now remind me again. Tell me again how you're fishing that. So you're in the deep water. You're casting into the shoal, so they can't see you as well.
Yeah, in that case, we're usually fishing strike indicators. So you might be 15 feet down under an indicator. Okay,
oh, right.
Trying to fish an emerger. But if what I'm saying is if there's damsel hatches or dragonfly hatches, those insects are not swimming out to the middle of the lake to hatch. They're usually looking for reeds to climb up on and emerge, right? So it makes more sense that you're swimming towards the shore. And I think sometimes a lot of people miss that. They fish, shallow to deep, which is great if you're fishing chironomids because they're just coming straight up in the water column. But those some of those larger insects, when we're fishing damsels and dragons, even caddis, they're usually heading towards the shore, right? They're looking for something to climb up on.
Interesting. Yeah, I mentioned Denny Rickards was on. He's a kind of a big guru down in our neck of the woods, and he broke down in the podcast like a step-by-step how he catches fish, and it was pretty sweet how he broke it down. But he said, he always fishes perpendicular, so to the shore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he's kind of dragging that fly in front of these fish as they're going in to feed in the shallows. And then, then I had another guest on that actually contradicted that a little bit. It's interesting. I mean, what's your take? Do you have a...
Well, it's fun. It's funny. That's a great question. I do fish perpendicular quite a bit, but in the back of my mind, and I don't know this to be true, but I have a feeling that if you are fishing perpendicular, you're probably spooking fish coming the other way behind you, if that makes sense. So think of it this way. If fish are cruising the shoreline, they don't want to see you over top of them in 15 feet of water. So if you're out in the deep or out in the shallow, I think you're probably going to spook less fish. Exactly. But you're also fishing perpendicular. You're going to be in the zone more, let's face it, because that's where those fish are, is that kind of that transition. They'll pop out of the deep water where they're protected from, ospreys and loons and jet up, grab a meal and jet back down.
That's it. Cool. Well, I have a little quick little segment I usually do. It's the 222 top 2 tips, top flies, top resources. And if we're looking at, on still waters and thinking of your home water here in some of these lakes, we mentioned chironomids. Do you have a couple of still water flies if you had to pick 2 for fishing tomorrow?
I love that question. Tomorrow, let's put it this way. I got to say, it's going to be a chironomid, the first fly I'm going to pick, and it's going to have a gray body with a black rib. I don't even have a name for this fly, to be honest with you. I do a lot of tying myself, but I see a black bead, black tungsten bead, white gill, unistretch, excuse me. And then I just go for a thin gray body with a black rib, like a extra small black wire rib, and that. It works so well around here. I think because they take it as a mayfly, they take it as a chironomid. Other than that, I'd probably have to say a big gomphus. I mean, like a big deer hair dragonfly pattern.
Oh, right.
Darners are great too. I mean, those hits are addictive, right? Because they hit them like a freight train going in the opposite direction. Totally different style of fishing, but they both have their place. And if it's fall, Late summer, I'm probably fishing something a little meatier, like a dragon.
There you go. And on those flies, you said there wasn't really a name if we wanted to search them on Google to find something.
Yeah. Well, on the deer hair gomphosis, in gray and green, that would probably be a go-to for me. And then as far as the chironomid, I mean, the other one is just a black body chironomid with a red rib and a white bead. We used to call them an ice cream cone. I don't even know the name for it, but you'll find them in every fly shop around here. It's kind of a standard go-to. But I'll be honest with you, what I've found with chironomids over the last few years is you need to get a little bit more creative, because sometimes whatever's working now may not work 3 years from now, and sometimes you have to tweak it a little bit. I know it sounds funny, but it's almost like the fish get used to it on highly pressured systems, and then you got to show them something a little different, whether it means having a red tag, like just a little bit of hemoglobin showing through, because red's so important in any chironomid pattern, as you know, because that's usually there's usually a little bit of red somewhere in there. If not, it's black or gray.
Okay. And then what about tips? So you're out there fishing tomorrow or this week, and you're let's say you're on one of the lakes, maybe one of those smaller lakes, fishing with chironomids, or any tips for helping somebody maybe find a couple of fish?
Travel around, because even on these small lakes, there can be huge hatches going on 100 yards behind you, and you don't even know. So watch the birds, watch the swallows, where the swallow's feeding. Look for casings coming off. Like if there's nothing in your area and you're trying to fish chironomids, then cruise around a little bit, because the water temperature is usually different all over the lake. If you're in shallow water, it's usually a little warmer depending on the time of season. But find the hatches, because that can make or break. And then the other thing I would say is we use fish finders all the time. So if those fish are in 15 feet and you're coming up on a whole big school of them, well, put that chironomid at 15 feet under an indicator and just wait, because that's when things get good. Oh, wow. If you find the fish, you can usually get into them. Where I get nervous is when you don't see the fish, because a lot of times they just seem to be cruising kind of haphazardly and the fish finder's not going off. Then those usually tend to be harder days for me personally. But if you find the fish, you put something in front of them, you're usually in for a good day.
That's it. And these fish finders, you're using these on a little, like a sadden boat? Yeah.
So we're using they don't even make them anymore, but Fishing Buddy 2.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that's a Humminbird product. And there's all kinds of new ones now out there. I mean, fish finders, as you know, the technology just gets wilder and wilder. I find, for me personally, I like the simple ones. That sometimes the more options and the more colors and the fancier they get, the more there is to go wrong. But Fishing Buddy 2 has been a great finder for a lot of years. I wish they still made it.
Yeah, no, it's a great, and I've never been a real big fish finder just because I just never went into it. But yeah, for those boats, so you can get them small enough where the battery and everything isn't weighing you down. You can get all your gear on there, no problem.
Yeah, 100%. Just takes batteries in the handle, and they last a long time.
Okay. And what about resource? What about if somebody was going to be heading up there to fish, your area? What would they, anything online, books, magazine, websites, any resources to help them maybe get prepared for a trip up there?
Yeah, you could look at, for one thing, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to help you and set you up in the right direction. I would say give Jordan Ulrich a call in Kamloops if you want to fish that area, because there's a guy that's doing it professionally as a guide. Real knowledgeable guy, knows the waters. I would call Brent Gill at the Douglas Lake Ranch and say, hey, what do you recommend? They'll set you up on some beautiful, once in a lifetime kind of trips out of their lodge there, and they've got beautiful accommodations. But if you're coming up this way, shoot me an email. Just mark at flyfishing97.com, and I'll point you in the right direction.
Sweet. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah, it sounds like, and as we were talking earlier, you listen to a lot of podcasts, but not necessarily a ton of fly fishing podcasts. If you had any other ones that, if you had to think of a fly fishing or a podcast that talks about still, I can't think of one. Is there one out there that?
I don't know if there's any that specifically. I know Jordan Ulrich actually had one on. Actually, he has a podcast on fly fishing still water specifically in our region. Yeah, to be honest with you, I try to keep it a little more general, because what I'm finding is I don't just want to talk about the areas that I'm in.
Yeah,
I want to talk about Colorado. I want to talk about Maine. I want to talk about Ontario. We've had
Yep.
guys and gals from the UK and all over South Africa. I mean, it's such a universal sport, pastime, that I think it's cool when we kind of get at least a slight understanding of what other, fishers are doing, because it's not the same all over the place. I mean, we're chasing similar fish and probably similar hatches, but the techniques and the methods vary drastically.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of spread around, but would you say you have more episodes focused on kind of Canadian areas and all that, or is it a good mix?
No.
No.
So what I do is I try never to be in the same region back to back. So
gotcha.
I got Lani on, he's in Mexico, but that's basically steelhead.
Yeah.
Then I'll go out to Wisconsin, or then, you know what I mean? I try to bounce around a lot. I try not to do two regions back to back. Just to keep it a little fresh. I think, I don't want to be known as just Stillwater podcast personally. I think for me, that's a little limiting. I just want to talk fishing with passionate people.
Yep. I did the same. I started out with a steelhead focused, the first 30 or so episodes, but then I came to that realization. I was like, well, man, I don't want to be just steelhead. I want to kind of talk about everything. And I think that makes it more enjoyable, right? I think that's the way to do it. So.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And then by that way, you never run out of content. You keep it fresh, and there's just so much to learn out there. Like, you could get an entomologist talking dragonfly patterns. You know what I mean? There's just so many ways to come at it, and none of us know it all.
Oh, I was just gonna say, do you have a entomologist that has been on talking about dragon, or have you had any entomologists on?
I have from Stroud Freshwater Research, I believe is in Penn State. Who else have I had on? I've had some fisheries biologists on. I've had some people from the fisheries, basically Ministry of Environment,
cool.
the ones that run the fish stocking programs. And so we talked about strains, and we talked about, actually, that was interesting to me, hearing the experts talk about the different strains, because it's changing all the time, and it's not static. And the technology, I mean, anytime these triploid fish that are all female fish that just don't stop growing and never get egg bound because they don't spawn, those are usually the pretty big fish in my neck of the woods.
That's amazing. Yeah, I always love to hear the entomologist. We've got one, Rick Hafele, who I've had on. He's our big entomologist kind of down here, and I've struggled to find other people, but yeah, it sounds like you've got a few. I'll have to dig into some of your back catalog.
Look up Stroud. They've got a team. They've got a team of entomologists there, and just some amazing people, and they're doing some great things in Penn State and all over, actually.
That's right. Yeah,
I think it's called Stroud Freshwater Research.
Yeah, I think that's right. Cool. All right, Mark. Well, hey, I got a little rapid fire round here. If you wanted to take us out of here, you ready to jump into this?
Sure. Let's do it.
So we've been talking, a little bit about podcasting, a little bit about fishing. I did want to dig in a little bit on the podcasting just to hear. I love to hear, from another fellow podcaster, your how you set up your things. Can you talk just quickly about kind of your mic, what mic you use, and how you set it up really quickly, just for the nerdy podcasting part?
Well, I went out and got a Shure mic. So I basically bought the most expensive mic I could find, and only because for me that's the tool, right? So without a good mic, you really don't have anything.
So you got you've got the Shure mic, and then you go into a mixer, and then into your computer.
Yeah, so I'm coming off a MSI laptop. I've just got my iPhone. All I'm doing, I don't even have a mixer board right now. I do plan on getting a new board, but I'm going through a Scarlet.
Okay.
Focusrite is the name of it.
Oh, that's right. So right now we're talking. So we're talking through Skype, and then your Skype is coming through your phone?
Correct.
Oh, yeah. So it's coming through your phone, and then
through my phone into the board.
Into the board, and then the board has your mic plugged into it.
Yeah.
Which you're recording.
I found that works really well for me, and I found that, and I'm sure you're probably similar, Skype is the way to go as far as audio quality. I just find with the cell phone, sometimes it drops out depending on, especially when you're talking to guides in the middle of nowhere. If they have decent Wi-Fi, Skype is usually the way to go.
It's interesting for me. I've got a Rodecaster Pro sitting here on my desk, and I don't even use it. I mean, I do use it, but I like the Zoom H6 for it's really small and compact and easy to just record on on my end. But I find that the Rodecaster, I know there's a couple podcasts use it, and that's the thing when they call on the cell phone, you can hear the guest. It really sounds like it's a cell phone. You know what I mean? Or Skype. My Skype, when I record some of my guests on a phone, I try to get them on Skype like we're doing, but I just find the quality, like you said, the quality is better with Skype, and Skype's been around for like 20 years. So,
to be honest with you, sometimes I cannot tell the difference between an in-house interview with somebody you're looking in the eye, or Skype. It's really, the quality is amazing.
That's cool.
But I find I never use the video because then it does drop out once in a while.
Yeah.
But the audio, it's killer.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Cool. So, and on podcasting, I think we've covered a lot of the stuff I wanted to dig into. Did you, I guess thinking about the show, can you just talk about long-term plans? It sounds like you're going to be in this. Do you have a plan? I mean, it sounds like you have some, you're looking at sponsors and stuff like that. What's your plan long-term with the podcast?
My plan is just to keep doing creative content, capturing people's stories that are passionate in the industry. I'm not trying to make $1 million doing this. For me, it's a passion. So we're sponsored by the Fly Crate, which I'm really grateful that Nate and the guys step in and do that, because they've been big supporters, and I'm not going to stop doing it. So whether I'm getting paid or not, I'm going to keep doing it. It started out, just so you know, the reason it's called Fly Fishing 97 podcast is I'm on the middle of Highway 97, which it's a big highway. It runs from Weed, California, goes all the way to Watson Lake, Yukon, and there are countless fishing opportunities on that highway. So that's kind of where it started, but then we just tried to branch out a little bit, keep it fresh, and plan on doing this for a long time, Dave.
That's awesome. Okay, that's good. So I always love hearing that, because this, likewise with me, I mean, these episodes are going to be out there for a long time, so it'll be fun to check back with you down the line. So on some random, I guess a little bit more random stuff, what's on your bucket list? Any places you want to hit up before you head out of here?
Yeah. How about Argentina?
Yeah.
I would love to get down there and chase some of those. I know the slang is Jurassic Lake.
Yeah.
I can't remember the proper name. It's a Spanish, it's not coming to me now, but I mean, those guys are chasing some giant fish. It looks pretty exciting to me. I'd love to get into some more sea run. Like, I keep hearing about these sea run browns.
Yep.
Love to try that. Have not tried that. And there's, steelhead. Mm-hmm. I'd love, there's a few rivers up in British Columbia that I definitely need to get to. The Babine is definitely on that list. The Bulkley,
yep. I know.
Permit bonefish. I have not done any warm weather. What about you? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, we're setting up. One of our sponsors, Got Fishing. Brian's helping me set up a trip to the Yucatan, so that's going to be really my first big saltwater trip early next year. So
cool.
Yeah, I'm still looking for a few more people to go on that, but I think if that comes together, it's got the big four, so we'll be covering it pretty good. And then, so what about gear? Just quickly on gear, do you have any specific? What do you use? Like rod wise, do you have a rod reel? Any companies you want to give a shout out to?
I'm an Orvis guy, and I don't get anything for anything. So anything you hear on the podcast is basically just from trial and error and what I like. But for me, I like a 10-foot rod for the type of fishing we're doing. 5-weight is perfect. I just find you need a little more leverage, especially if you're casting some long leaders with indicators and whatnot. It tends to get a little top heavy. I've got a Helios 3F that I love, but I've also got a Hardy that I love. I've got an Echo. They all have their place, and I'm talking Canadian dollars here, so $1,200 for a fly rod.
Damn, it's not cheap.
No, so I mean, I love what some of these companies are doing in the $300-400, like Echo, Douglas. There's a lot of great brands out there, and I'm not going to go and spend $1,200 on a fly rod very often, but when I do, it's a beautiful rod. I like a fast action rod. I'm not the greatest caster in the world. I get it out there. I know it's flawed, But I'm old school. I learned a long time ago, and it's pretty hard to change my habits.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you. I'm kind of the same way. Yeah, it's not perfect, but I could get it out there. Cool, Mark. Well, I think we're about there. Anything else before we get out of here? I think we're going to kind of hit up another show here quickly, so we'll probably dig into some other stuff. But in the next 6 to 12 months, any you want to give a shout out to anything you have coming with yourself for the podcast? Anything new?
Well, just that we're just trying to get more people that are passionate about fly fishing. And I appreciate you doing this, because for me, it's just that shared passion. I'm looking forward to having you on my show. That's going to be exciting.
Yep.
I got Lani Waller, Steelhead Guru, coming up.
That's huge.
Yeah, and we're working on a few things, but I try not to, I'll be honest with you, Dave, I try not to get too far ahead, because what I found, if I have 15 shows in the bag, sometimes I lose that relevancy in the current stuff that's going on. Like when COVID hit. Oh, yeah. I had all these shows, and these guys are saying, well, I'm going here, I'm flying to Belize. Well, guess what? You're not going anywhere. Nope. So all of a sudden, I had to kind of backtrack and say, okay, so now guides are sitting at home. What's going on? How are you keeping busy? So we try to be current, but at the same time, not get too far ahead. I'm usually about 2-3 weeks out, and I try to just kind of keep the shows that way.
There you go. So you schedule them. You try to get. So right now, do you have a few episodes scheduled up and ready to go in the queue?
I only have 2. Well, I'm going to have 3 after this. So, so and then that's kind of my comfort zone. 3 shows in the bag, and because then I can really focus in on. I like editing, and not that I want it to be polished and perfect. Yeah, because I definitely try to capture people's kind of personalities. So sometimes I find if I edit too much, it kind of, you got to be careful with that, right? And the interviewing, you know what I'm learning is how to interview people, because that is a skill, and it takes time to develop that. For sure. Yeah. I'll give another shout out, the Outdoors Online Marketing podcast. I had probably, I think, one of the biggest guests in the podcast space, Eric Nuzum. He's the guy that created the TED Hour podcast and a lot of the NPR podcasts. He goes way back, and he wrote a book called Make Noise, and I always love to recommend that for anybody in podcasting, because it's a huge book, and it doesn't talk about the kind of the how-tos, but it's more the deeper stuff on podcasting, and it was just a great interview. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that one as well for anybody that wants to check that out. But yeah, Mark, this has been fun. I think we're gonna keep going here in a little bit, but I just wanted to say, thanks for coming on here as we wrap this up. Like I said, I think I've had a few people definitely have reached out to me and said, you gotta chat with Mark, and they love your show. So I love what you're doing over there, and let's just keep in touch as we go and kind of keep moving forward. Well, hopefully you and I will be able to chase some fins. I'd really love it if you're up my neck of the woods. Give me a shout. I love what you're doing with the show, both of them, and thanks for doing this, man. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers. So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes with all links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/149. Have you asked a question for one of our guests yet? I'd love if you could head over to wetflyswing.com/Facebook and join the group we have going. Just click join, and I'll reply to you pretty quick. This is a great chance for you to get in on the action and actually get some of your biggest questions answered. So would love to hear from you over there. And thanks for listening. Really appreciate the support. Every show is huge for me, so I want to thank you for that. And want to thank you today for stopping by. I hope to catch up with you soon. Maybe see you out there online or on that river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.